Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Yevamot daf Dalid, we are going to start on the very top of Dalid Amud Aleph, the first line. But before we do, we need to review the two questions that are on the very bottom of Gimel Mid Beis. We mentioned that the reason for our Mishnah, which told us that when it comes to the dinim of Yibum, if we're dealing with an Ereva, so they are pater from Yibum, they're pater from Chalitza, as well as their tzara, their co-wife. Now, we derive this based on the pasuk Aleha. On this, the Gemara asks a question. The only reason why we're able to say that the Yevama is pater, that she doesn't have to do Yibum, is only because of this pasuk, which is mashma without the pasuk. For some reason, you actually think you'd still be chayiv to do Yibum even on an Ereva. How could that possibly be? So we say, well, maybe because aseh is doichalos aseh. There's an aseh, a positive mitzvah of doing Yibum. There's a los aseh of not having relations with these individuals who are your Ereva. So comes an aseh is doichalos aseh. So the first question the Gemara asked is that, well, fine, maybe that's an aseh greda, aseh los aseh greda. However, over here, we're talking about alosa se sheish bo kares. It's much more serious. So maybe an aseh will not be daicha alosa se sheish bo kares. So why do we need this pasuk? Question one. The second question is stam. Why do we say, and how do we know this concept of aseh is daicha alosa se? So now let's see the beginning of our Gemara. Daled and Aleph. The chesiv of the pasuk says, regarding the mitzvah of tzitzis, silva shatnis, gedilim tasalach. So the pasuk tells us that a person is not allowed to wear shatnez, a mixture of wool and linen. Rashi says, that when it comes to tzitzis, you could put them on and wear them, but they're shinim smuchin. So what is this juxtaposition? Visharin and kilayim tzitzis. So we allow a person to be able to have kilayim in their tzitzis, even though, again, there's a prohibition of wearing wool and linen together, but we learn that it's okay. Fine. Alma says Rashi, aseh aseh v'doicha los aseh. The aseh of wearing tzitzis is doicha, the los aseh of not wearing shatnez. The Yomi Belazir smuchim in a terminayin. So how do you know there is a concept of smuchim? Shnemer smuchim ad lo'om asuim be'emes v'yosher. It's a pretty straightforward pasuk that says that smuchim are forever and they're true and straight. The Omer of Sheshes Omer Belezer, Mishum Belezer Ben Azariah, Menayin Liyavama Shanaflef Ne Mukashchin She'ein Chaismin Oisa. So how do we know, also through Smuchin, that if you have a woman who is technically falling to Yevama, to Yibum, but the problem is that the man, her married brother, the brother who she was married to, who died, his sibling, his brother, is a Mukashchin. So how do we know that we're not going to silence her? We're not going to muzzle her, which means we are going to allow her to speak up and say that she is not interested in she's not interested in being with him. Shenemer lo saksam shabadisho. It talks about not muzzling an ox while you're threshing. Which is the mitzvah of Yibum. So look in Rashi, Shein Chaismin. Ein Saismin Tainoi. We don't close her complaints. L'koifel l'siyavim, well, to say you got to marry him. El koifenoso v'choylitz, he has to do chalitza. Chaismin lishn dekra kanaka dielfla loy saksom. So this is a second drasha. Question TB18. Elu beis dinim l'kuliyam l'husker b'sugin Mekayram Memedrish Smuchin b'Mishnah Torah. So we see these two smuchin, the notion by wearing tzitzis with shatnez in them, and also that a woman does not have to marry a mukashchin. She could speak up, and we will not force it. Rather, chalitz will be done. Fine. V'yomer Rabbi Yosef, afil woman to lo darsh smuchin b'yalma b'Mishnah Torah darsh. Even though there's some people that don't darsh and smuch, we'll see who in a second. However, in Sefer Devarim he does. How do we see this? The Rabbi Yehuda ba'alma lo darsh, Mishnah Torah darsh. Rabbi Yehuda typically does not darsh and smuchin. when it comes to Kol Torah Kula, with the exception of Sefer Devar. How do we know that he doesn't hold it Smuchin? The Sanya, as we're about to quote a pasuk in Sefer Shemos, Benazi Emer Nemer Machashefo Sachaya, someone who is engaged in witchcraft shall not live. And Nemer Kol Shechavim Behem Omos Yumos. Anyone who lies down with an animal will be killed. So Samcha Inyan Lo Ma Shechavim Behem Beskila. Just like when it comes to someone who is engaged in bestiality, in which the pasuk Beferish tells us the punishment is skila, demei bum. And whenever it says demei bum, it's skila. So abachshem skila. So too, this person who's engaged in witchcraft also gets skila. So we see through this notion of smuchin. So therefore, that's how we know that this person who is engaged in machashefa will be killed with skila. Even though the pasuk doesn't say, it just says l'sachayim. So Rabbi Yehuda, basically, he's gonna he will not disagree. The punishment will be skila for machshefa. However, he's not going to derive from smuchin, as he doesn't darshan smuchin in Sefer Shemos. So Elwa, how does he know that this will be in fact the punishment? We know, as we mentioned, in numerous other Masechtas, including Masechtas Me'ilah, that Oven Yedoni fall under the category of witchcraft. V'lomi Yotzu, so why are they excluded? To make the hekesh So this is based on the concept of Kol Davish B'chlal. I'm not sure if Rashi says this. Yeah. Shazu mida b'Torah kol davar shay b'chlal the yotza min haklal lamed lamed al atzmo yotza lamed al klal kol yotza. This is almost verbatim the Gemara Masechtas Brachos Nav Yud. So we see that he does not darshan smuchin. Daf Chaf Aleph rather. She talks about Balkari over there. But Mishnah Torah Minolim Darsh. How do we know that he does darshan smuchin in Sefer Devarim? Did none. Noisa Adam Anusas Aviv. A mafutas aviv, anusas beno, mafutas beno. So it says Rashi, shol neser olav oilomis, we do not aser el ashes aviv, only marrying or having relations with your father's wife, your stepmother. Kedechsiv ervas ashes avicha ve'ashes mashma aidi ishus de kedushin. So it's mashma dafka, that is aser. However, a person is allowed to marry a nusas aviv if, again, it wasn't that the father had kedushin, but he was ma'anis a woman, or he was mafata a woman. A nusas beno, mafotas beno. So according to the Shita of the Tanakama, it's not an issue. It's only in the situation where there was kedushin. Yehuda says no. When it comes to your father, there's not just an issue of ishus, of having relations with ishus avicha, your father's wife, but also even if she's not your father's wife, but she was ma'anis from your father, or your father was mafata her, if either raped or seduced. The Yomi of Gidol Marav, my time Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say this? The pasuk says, "Lo es ashes aviv." A person is not allowed to take his father's wife, and then it adds, "Lo yigal kanaf aviv." So what does that mean? It's kanaf shara aviv lo yigala. That the kanaf, the garment which was exposed, that the father saw, you're not to migala. So therefore, according to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, he learns out this pasuk to tell you it's referring to a nusas aviv. How do you know that this pasuk in its meaning is referring to a nusas aviv? It says before that you give the man who is shaykhim with her So there's a din of chamishim kesef oines mafata. The samachle will yikach ish begoimer. So the fact that we have this smuchin, so therefore, again, even according to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, he holds a smuchin, and therefore he learns that there's an isser also of There's also an isser not only by taking Eishes Aviv, but even Anusas Aviv. I've Rabbanan. So what the Rabbanan do with this pasuk? Now, if in fact you would say they were next to each other, I agree. But they're not really juxtaposed. Because there's the pasuk in between. So therefore, what does this pasuk actually refer to? Or maybe even 3 lavin. So it's referring to a situation where it's a shomeres yavam. So not only you're not allowed to take your father's wife, but even if, let's say, your father had a brother and that brother died and he was childless, so now his wife is a shomeres yavam, which means he didn't do yibum yet. Your father's going to do yibum. He hasn't done it yet, but he's going to eventually marry her alidei yibum. And therefore, for that, you're not allowed to take her either. So this is the answer to question 7. When it says, L'yikach ishes eishes aviv, l'yigal knaf aviv, ma bo hatarul aser b'l'yigal knaf aviv. So according to the Shita Rabbi Huda, it's Anusas Aviv. According to the Tanakama, Shemeres Yavam Shul Aviv. Okay. Weiter. So the Mishnah Torah, my time of the Darish. So how come Taka, when it comes to Mishnah Torah, he darshins? Rabbi Huda. So Iboy saying Mishum Demuchach. Maybe it's because it's clear, says Rashi. Mucha, it's clear that way. L'midrashinhu ahadadi samchinhu. The fact that they're written next to each other is to be able to make this connection. The Iboy saying alternatively Mishum Demufne, because there's extra words. And when you have psukim which are mufne, so you can learn out drushes. So we're going to interpret each one. What does it mean that it's muchach, that it's so clear? Dim Kain, if it wasn't coming to teach us this drasha, then then it should just write it together with a rayas. Says Rashi, Lavi Gabi Eishes Av Ka'asi. If it's only coming to do is add on to Eishes Av, then in that situation, it should just be mentioned over there by the other Arias. The fact that it's separated shows that it's coming to tell us something different. And again, it's coming to teach us this idea that is also an Isser of Anusas Aviv. That's how we see that it's Muchach. So why does it have these extra words? It's extra words as we continue to Dalan Medbeis. Shema Minol if Nuye its taka is mufne. Therefore it is extra. Fine. Now, the Gabi Tzitz is Nami. Also when it comes to the din of tzitzes, the whole idea by tzitzes, which happens to be in Sefer Devarim, Chaf Beis, so therefore becomes, even according to the sheet of Rabbi Huda, would darshan smuchen. So how come he darshan smuchen by tzitzes? So again, either because it's clear that it must be the pshat, or because it's extra. Then it should be written by Parsha Sitzes and Parsha Shlach. Why is it written over here, Dafka? Why is it written by the dinim of shatness? It must be, it's come to tell you that you're allowed to have shatness in your tzitzis. Maybe it's because it's extra. So the fact that it has this extra sentence, this extra clause is extra. Now, if you want to tell me the reason is because of muchach, maybe, but mufna, it's not mufna, because you need both these psukim. Why? Because if he only had the pasuk lecha, habamina kol derech halah aser rachmana, a person is not allowed derech halah, namely even to drape it over you. And we're talking about, of course, where there's hana, but it's not a great level of hana. And maybe it's halah's aser, they feel meichri ksus, even if all you're trying to do is sell the garment, you're just throwing it over your body, which is just for selling it. The only time you're chayiv is dafka if there's hana. If you do a halah derech mecher, you're just trying to sell it. Instead of putting it on a mannequin or on a clothes hanger, you just drape it over your shoulder and you're trying to show it so it can be sold. There's no hana over there. You're just doing it, again, to make a sale. And therefore, that's actually mutter. Because maybe the only time there's an isser of shatnez is dafka in a situation where you get a lot of hana because you're actually wearing it. But maybe there's no isser of halah. So therefore, it's actually a sricha, and therefore it's not necessarily mufna. So with that, this is question 8 in TA 19. Question 8 says, Madu isra chamichtav gabi shatnez gamul silvash v'gam lo lalecha. So lo yale l'aser derech halah b'lo levisha. That it's the aser draping it below levisha. And lo silbash is lahatim meichrik sus delav dumi de levishahu. That when it comes, it says lo silbash, it matters meichrik sus because you're not wearing it like you normally would wear it. You're selling. So derech mecher is allowed. However, halah is not allowed. So imkain lichtav rachman lo silbash shatnez. So still, you want to tell me it's not extra? Then it could just say that semer pishtal amli. Why does it have to mention the word semer pishtal? Wool and linen. Michti. Kasav, it's written ubeged kilayim shatnez lo lecha the tanda Rabbi Shmuel. Hoyav but Torah stam begadim. Since it mentions begadim stam in the Torah, uprat locha kasav be'echem. And then when it comes to the dinim of saras, it mentions them. So semer pishtin. I've called semer pishtin. So therefore, it's obviously specific, referring to these things. So let's look at Rashi. Alright, so regarding saras, it says bebeged semer ubebeged pishtim. Now, since it says it over there, and therefore when it says the pasuk, and then it's parat, it's talking about wool and linen. So I've called semer pishtin. So semer pishtin chaz rachman olam lishmam lefnuye. Now you'd be able to learn out the whole din of having wool and linen together from the dinim of tsaras, that the pasuk says semer pishtin over there. So therefore, it actually is mufna, and that's how come you can make this drasha. Avikati itzruch. You still need these words semer pishtin. They're not extra. Sach de'lemina. Halahi toloi nafesh hanasa. Maybe when it comes to halah, which is just draping it over you, there's not a lot of hana. However, when you're wearing it, you get hana. So kol trei mine asrachmana. Any two materials are aser. Kasrachmana semer pishtin. In other words, maybe we're not talking about dafka semer pishtin. Maybe there's a prohibition stam of any type of a garment and of two materials. That's why the pasuk has to say semer pishtin. The whole isser of levisha, where there's a lot of hana, is only by semer pishtin. So the pasuk still needs to mention that. So imkain lishta kramine, but tesi shatnez bahalah. If that's true, you can learn out shatnez from halah. In other words, you could have already derived this concept of halah, that's a prohibition of halah, and that means wool and linen. So again, you don't need the pasuk of semer pishtin, therefore it's extra. But Tana Rabbi Shmuel, according to the Tana Rabbi Shmuel, time of the kasar rachmana semer pishtin, the fact that it says semer pishtin, that you could wear them in your tzitzis, holav hachi. If let's say it doesn't mention this, then kilayim b'tzitzis, then it's considered to be kilayim. So havamina the aser rachmana. You would think that maybe it's aser. I boksiv v'asol hem tzitzis al kante v'gnihem. The pasuk says v'asol hem tzitzis. The Tana Rabbi Shmuel kol begadim semer pishtim heim. All of the garment is wool and linen. Yom rachmana avid l'lei techeles with techeles amrahu, and we know that the techeles is amra, is wool. So we already know from the pasuk that talks about tzitzis, in which, let's say, is linen, but the actual tzitzis themselves, the strings, are made out of wool. So we already know this drasha. So memai de tchelis amrahu. How do you know necessarily that the tchelis is made out of wool? Mideshesh kisna tchelis amrahu. From that it says shesh kisna, which is linen. Tchelis must be that the tchelis is wool. Itzrach. Saltach and Amina Kidarava. Derava Ramiksiv. He has the stira. On one hand, the pasuk says hakanaf. What does it mean of the corner? It means min kanaf. That you need to use the same min, namely the garment and the strings must be the same. Uksiv semer pishtin, but yet it says semer pishtin, which means only these materials, wool or linen. Haketzad. So semer pishtin, paitrin, bein b'minan, bein shelo b'minan. When it comes to wool and linen, it potters whether it is the same material for the strings or a different material. Once you have semer pishtin, then you're able to then use whichever other strings you want. However, shar minim, let's say use other type of material other than wool and linen, then b'minan paitrin. You could be potter, but you have to use the same material for the strings as the garment. Shelo b'minan ein paitrin. However, if you don't use the same material as the beged and the strings, then you're not doesn't pater you, which means that you're not wearing tzitzis. Even though this statement of Rava, he doesn't hold that that's the pshat in the stira. When did Rava make this diyak hakanaf min kanaf? That the whole din of kanaf of the corner is that it has to be min kanaf, that has to be the same, that the garment must be the same as the strings. You have to make wool for wool when for linen. When you do wool for wool, savia, then that's how it's dyed. However, wool and linen or linen and wool, no. Because of semer pishtin. If you semer pishtin, upishtin with semer. Then even when it comes to semer pishtin, pishtin semer, the same din applies. So up until this point, again, we're going to stop here, but we're in the middle of this discussion. Again, when it comes to tzitzis, what exactly is the din? Whether or not a person is allowed to wear shatnez. So we said beferish that you are, perhaps because it's smuchin. However, even though everyone holds a smuchin, we wanted to understand why is there smuchin. So we said, well, maybe because there is this, it's mufna, because it's extra. Question is it mufna? Because in fact, maybe it's a srichasa, that you need them, as we saw. And the Gemara continues on in this form of a discussion, whether or not these words are mufna. Let me see if there's any questions. Question 8, we did. TATB Adkan.